to tell me when you start. Oh, you
I did. I started.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Faith Batt. I'm the Speaker Series Manager for Friends of the Boca Raton Public Library. We're so happy to have you joining us today. We're going to, in a moment, show a quick little 1-minute video we have to announce the great news that our bookstore has open hours. Yay! So we're really excited about that and looking forward to seeing you all there. We have an amazing assortment of books and the prices are great. We're very honored today to welcome our special guest, Richard Emery. And I will do a brief intro for Mr. Emery, and then we'll show the video, and then we will get started with our program. After presenting briefly, Richard Emery is a career environmental law enforcement attorney, retired from the United States Environmental Protection Agency. He served as our nation's top lawyer directly responsible for all EPA investigations of pollution crime. Then for many years, he worked globally in EPA foreign assistance to other nations also wanting clean air and clean water. Before coming to EPA in 1980 in his home state of Maryland, he served as an elected state legislator and was twice appointed as Assistant Attorney General, prosecuting environmental offenders statewide. In 1967, he graduated from Harvard Law School after studying international relations at Yale and serving in the US Coast Guard Reserves. After presenting briefly on the threats presented by climate change, he will review how EPA has dealt successfully with many other issues of air pollution and can readily manage climate change too. For a problem that can only be solved globally, he will focus on the national and international solutions of both technology and policy that are available and can be applied quickly. The revised first edition of his book includes an afterword for EPA going forward, in which 4 of the author's EPA colleagues add the weight of their experience and wisdom as well. Richard Emery's website for the book, there's different websites, but it's www.fightingpollutionbook.com. And you can also connect with him and follow him on Facebook, richard.w.emery, E-M-O-R-Y, okay? And the title of his book is being discussed today, Fighting Pollution and Climate Change, an EPA Veteran's Guide, How to Join in Saving our Planet, our life on planet Earth. So we'll be back in just a moment. And now we'll show a brief video promoting the opening of our bookstore. Thank you.
Hang on till I get the sound going.
If you want, we can show it at the end, either way.
I'll see if I can get it this time.
Okay, thank you for your patience, everyone.
Oh, probably should show it at the end, Faith. I'll try to figure it out.
Okay. Well, we're back, and I'd like to welcome our guest, Richard Emery, and I'll just turn it over to you, and we'll get going. We're very excited to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Well, okay. Can you all hear me? Can
Yes, we
anybody
can.
can anybody see me? I can't
Only a
see
little bit.
I can't
We-
see myself, but
We
that's
do
okay.
see. We
You
do.
can?
Yes.
Can we see the slides?
No.
Not yet.
Yeah, Tracy's going to share screen. She's going to
Okay.
back.
Hold on a second.
I'm so afraid of doing something wrong and blowing myself out of the whole show.
Here we
Well,
go.
we have a very, very forgiving audience.
Okay.
We're
Well-
grateful that you're here with us. Don't
All
worry.
right. Well, if you can hear me, okay. I'll
Yeah,
go
there
ahead.
we go.
Oh, thank you. Well, this talk is mostly about our environment and the fate of us and our planet. It's partly an author's book event. And recently I published the book you see on the screen. And what I will say in this talk, it's all in my book, uh, some environmental science for the non-scientist. And best of all, I tell entertaining stories of adventure that model for your young people uh, the fulfillment, fun, and even joy to be found in taking up a career in planet protection, working inside the USA and perhaps around the world, like I was able to do too. Well, it's also addressed to all of you as mature leaders. It speaks directly to young people, and it's just a book for you to give to your child or grandchild if they care about nature, if they're green. And I'm happy to say that all Amazon reviews are 5-star, and I've kept the price as low as possible at $18.95. Now, as this is in part a literary event, I want to start reading an excerpt from the very start of my book. And these 800 words were published separately, actually in a publication of the Allen Institute of Maine called the Working Waterfront, under the title, A Childhood for Telling. And for fun and authenticity, I will read the first paragraphs in the down east accent of the coast of Maine, where my story begins more than 70 years ago. You can still hear it there if you go really far down east, and you can hear it in Nova Scotia. Now, you probably know the line. It was a dark and stormy night, as the cliched opening is to be avoided for writing a book. Well, my first sentence tries to have the same appeal, but it's not those same words. I hope it grabs you and pulls you in. So are you ready?
Mhm.
Are you ready to go to the coast of Maine in 1950?
Yes.
Ready.
At the sounding of the horn, some women, permanent residents of our little town, grabbed their sharpest knives and rushed out their front doors. In the street, they were joined by hungry cats and excited children like me, then 8 years old and attracted to the commotion. We all rushed down the road to the harbor to see coming in from the sea the sardine transport boat arrived at what we called the fish factory. Being halfway down east on the coast of Maine, the town women anticipated a rare payday. The year was 1949. After being lifted out of the hold of the transport boat, the little fish would travel down a long watery sluice, roofed over to keep out the seagulls. The smells, the sights, the sounds, the squawking gulls, meowing cats, heavy motors running, the women talking and their eyes flashing as they worked, water rushing down the sluice, were irresistible to me and the town children there too. Then the sardine carrier's hold was emptied, all was packed, and the fish factory became quiet again. In their homes, the women put some cash in the dresser drawers and resumed preserving summer fruits and vegetables to keep in their cellars against the long, hard winter to come. All too soon it would be September, and I would be taken 600 miles south to my parents' home in Baltimore. Well, from here, I'll drop my far North Atlantic accent and speak in my natural Mid-Atlantic accent. After a long school year in a big city, finally June would come again and I would return north to live in my grandmother's home at the cold harbor. Another summer had come to the coast of Maine and then would come another, but the big sardine boat never returned. The fish factory became a boatyard for building and repairing the yachts and small pleasure boats of summer. Fish processing jobs were surely tough, low-paying, and intermittent. And in 2010, the last Maine sardine factory closed. Now, whether the year-round people of the town considered this change for better or for worse, I cannot say. To me, the arrival of the sardine boat is a shimmering memory of big excitement during childhood, glorious, carefree summer days of childhood. But a way of life was ending, and in 1959, my childhood would end too. Now, long since I've been lucky, I was so lucky to have been a summer child living in Maine in my grandmother's house. I have wondered, why did the sardines disappear? And now we know that around the world, many fisheries have been exploited to the point of commercial extinction. Man-made plastics are being eaten by and killing marine animals, birds, and fish. And scientists say that in a few decades, there'll be a greater weight of plastics in the sea than the weight of fish in the sea. As the climate changes in Maine, it's possible in a few decades that lobsters and clams may disappear like the sardines. In 50 years, for today's children now on the Maine coast, digging at low tide for clams, seeing lobster boats coming and going, these too may become just shimmering memories of a colorful way of life gone by. Now, the mystery and beauty of the Maine coast certainly affected me. And 40 years later, I was surprised to find myself serving as our nation's top lawyer for all EPA investigations of pollution crime. Then for 17 years, I had the privilege to represent our nation in foreign assistance service worldwide, often collaborating with the United Nations and advising other nations on US strategies, which were then much admired, for implementing clean air and water laws. Along the way, I saw too many man-made insults to nature, including oncoming climate chaos. Being the Earth's most invasive species, humanity is driving other creatures to extinction at an unnatural rate of about 1,000 times. It's estimated, nobody knows, but between 100 to 1,000 times the natural rate of extinction. In about 200 years, it's likely that our man-made fossil-fueled air pollution will reach the level to poison the sea and in the sky, turning the air we breathe into a green toxic gas. If my generation and today's leaders continue with business as usual, the last people to live on Earth will be our great-great-grandchildren. Then, like the sardines of Maine, they will all be gone, never to be seen again. Well, that reading ends my reading from A Childhood Foretelling. It's the story that opens my book. And in the next 30 minutes, I want to talk about environmental protection going forward from today. But you may be wondering, Mr. Emery is so old and he's retired, and will he just be telling us ancient history? Well, here's the answer. In 1974, I was elected to the Maryland legislature just for one term. President Biden is less than 2 years younger than me, and in 1973, he was elected to the US Senate, where he served for decades. Now, he worked at a very high level, and I do not know him, but in parallel, we worked in Washington. When I came to EPA in 1980, we worked for many decades in Washington in public service and saw this. It went down a similar paths. And today I'm in contact with many other EPA retirees. We have an association we call the EPA Alumni Association, advising the Biden administration. And I know that what I will be telling you today is close to what President Biden is hearing. So he's acting now to build back better. And already he's begun restoring EPA to its glory days when it was the model for the world. And I was so fortunate to have served inside EPA headquarters and for EPA around the world. So you can be sure that what I'll be telling you is for you and your green children and grandchildren is very, very relevant for the future. Now, I want to give you 5 clear takeaways, and we can start the slides now. Humanity as you see it here, began only about a quarter of a million years ago, 250,000 years ago. Since 500 million years ago, when the simplest forms of life began on Earth, there have been 5 mass extinction events caused by natural climate change. Now, uh, from the New York Yankees, I suppose, have many of you heard of the baseball player and famous folksy philosopher Yogi Berra? Some of us have. And I have a few Yogi Berra quotes in here just to lighten this up. And Yogi said famously, "The future ain't what it used to be." Now, you may or may not know that already we are in the middle of the 6th mass extinction of life on Earth, and it is the first man-made extinction. As humanity, as I said, being the planet's most invasive species, we're killing off many other species at up to 1,000 times the natural rate. And most obvious to lose are these so-called charismatic megafauna. Tigers, rhinos, and elephants are all driven to the edge of extinction by modern human hunters just to harvest and eat their parts, especially skins, tusks, and horns. They believe the rhino tusks are medicinal in Eastern traditional medicine, but it's nothing. There's nothing more than keratin. You can just get just as healthy by eating your toenails as eating a rhino horn. Uh, Man-made global warming is now extinguishing many other species, including polar bears coming to the edge. This next is not a photograph, but this polar bear can't bear to see what is happening, and how ironic that a major cause of heat at the North Pole is unnatural, meaning man-made chemicals from our air conditioning equipment. To stay cool in our homes, we're killing polar bears in their home. And of course, they can't catch seals in the water. They can only catch them on the ice. And if there's no ice, they can't eat seals. Uh, a book about this that I highly recommend to you is by Elizabeth Colbert, The 6th Extinction and Unnatural History. Now, you probably know her from reading The New Yorker, and she's a wonderful writer. And each chapter is a varied and true adventure story of discoveries she visits around the world, the most remote outposts of science. I mean, she showed up on Pacific atolls, Antarctica, Arctica, the jungle. She shows up and says, "Hi, I'm Elizabeth Colbert. I'm from the New Yorker. Take me out in the field. I like to get dirty. I like to get in the mud. We're going to take samples, and then show me your laboratory. Tell me everything, and I'll write a chapter about you in my book." And she has 17 chapters, and each one's an adventure story with science in it. Like me, she's not a scientist, but she showed me how to include plenty of storytelling and science for the non-scientists, and to entertain and lighten the dire findings of science. And I do thank her for showing me that technique. Now, to conclude your dismal takeaway number 1, here are 4 horsemen: pestilence, famine, war, and death. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. People have had images from we do have these images from the past of what could happen to us. This is not a new thought, the apocalypse, but if we, the people, continue polluting the air with business as usual, burning fossil fuels and emitting other man-made climate-killing chemicals, in the 23rd century, humanity may be joining in the 6th extinction that we're imposing on so many other species. Now, next month in the Atlantic magazine, if you get it, you'll find a letter to the editor that they're going to publish, I believe. I can say that because its fact checkers called me up and corrected my letter there to be published. They said, no, extinction is possible in the 22nd century. That's just the next century that humanity may go extinct. So I don't know. I thought it was the 23rd century. I thought we might have more time, but nobody really knows. Anyway, hug your children well, hug your grandchildren well. For the geologic record and biochemical dynamics of mass extinctions caused by climate change, read Peter D. Ward's book. This is pretty heavy science. It's entitled, I'll read it because you can't really read the subtitle, perhaps. It says, "Under a Green Sky," that's a toxic sky, of course, global warming, the mass extinctions of the past, and what they can tell us about our future. Now, past extinctions were caused by magma from the Earth's core burning up through coal and oil underground, erupting as lava and volcanoes, and emitting so much CO2 that created hydrogen sulfide, the deadly gas that repeatedly has wiped out most life on Earth. And today, with, as I said, with our burning fossil fuels, there's no reason to think that the Earth's history, geologic history, will not repeat itself. Well, why would geologic history not repeat itself? And for now, I'll just say that humanity is also burning fossil fuels is on a path to total suicide and a man-made sixth extinction. Well, your second takeaway is that first will come the flooding. Can you see the sign on the way in the back? It looks like a bridge. It says "Time to buy a new home." That's a good thought. During the lives of our grandchildren, everyday street flooding will be so bad as to begin to shut down our seaports and cause our descendants to begin to abandon vast coastal areas in all our major cities at sea level. Hurricane Katrina, Superstorm Sandy, the flooding of Houston, the total demolition of Abaco and Grand Bahama Islands. These are just hints of what's coming. We get next slide. In this century, catastrophic ocean flooding is now inevitable. This is from Superstorm Sandy, of course. You see the New York taxi cabs. You might say that this flooding is baked in by global warming. It's probably too late to prevent the loss in the 22nd century of much of America. Geologic history that indicates that the sea will rise 65 to 85 feet no matter what we do now. This risk has doubled during the last 40 years while coal, gas, and oil companies covered up the known scientific facts. Now, if we melt all the ice on Earth, if we continue business as usual, and I don't think we will, but if we were to melt all the ice on Earth, the maximum the sea can rise is 220 feet. And here's we see that what our nation will look like with, all the port cities gone and Florida gone, and amazing how far the sea will come up the Mississippi River. Now, again, in the words of that famous folksy philosopher, Yogi Berra, and I quote, I'm sorry, I laugh whenever I think of Yogi Berra. You can observe a lot by just watching. Well, High Tide on Main Street, The Rising Sea Level and the Coming Coastal Crisis is a great book by my friend John Engledew. You may know, some of you may know him. I think he lives in Boca, northern Brevard County, and he has been just watching. And he is one of a number of scientists. This book is very readable. It's not like Peter Ward's book. This book you can easily read and really get it. But it's serious science too. And he shows us that CO2, heat, and sea level all rise and fall together. Now this chart, the next slide, shows that. I'd like to. Well, I wish we could see the right. I hope you all can see the right-hand side of this, which I really can't, but because my picture's blocking it out, but that's okay. This goes back 425,000 years, and it shows on the extreme right side, which may be hidden by our pictures, that since the last ice age, there's a level time of 10,000 years when the climate has been quite benign and the sea levels have been stable, and it's enough for our civilization to develop with constant shorelines. But since the start of the Industrial Revolution, look in the upper right-hand corner. Can you see this? The red circle? CO2 it's literally off the chart. It's now at 420 parts per million. Now, a temperature rise lags a decade or two behind CO2 concentration, which is the first chart, and sea level at the bottom lags maybe a century or two. But in geologic time, this is simultaneous concurrence or synchronicity. And the last time CO2 was as high as it is today was over 3 million years ago, and then the sea was 65 to 85 feet higher. And again, I say, with our business as usual burning fossil fuels, there's no reason to think the Earth's future will not be like the past. Why would geologic history not repeat itself? So While catastrophic sea level rise is now inevitable, baked in, science is uncertain about the exact decade or century of the timing of this disaster. Now, it could be sooner rather than later, and maybe in this century because we're approaching a number of tipping points. It's kind of like Thelma and Louise approaching the climate cliff. Tipping points that may occur anytime and soon. I don't have time for the details, but I just want to run through the biggest causes, the three of them, of accelerating and imminent sea level rise. Now, this methane hole in Siberia, around the Arctic in Siberia, the global warming is the most, and it melts the permafrost in the tundra, and the methane that's buried natural gas erupts. Sometimes in deep craters. It looks like a rocket ship might have come out of there, but that's just methane blowing up. The Arctic is the fastest warming place on Earth, and one molecule of methane or natural gas is about 100 times more climate killing than a molecule of CO2. Now, remember that thought, remember that fact. Methane is 100 times worse than CO2 on a per molecule basis. That gives you the human scale of it with this a young guy looking down into the hole. It's about 100 feet across, I believe. Now, second, Antarctica, the Earth's other pole, there the warming, surprisingly, the deep water is warming, undermining the Antarctic glaciers that may soon slip off the land and into the sea. Can we have the next slide of Antarctica? There are 6 or more glaciers in West Antarctica, but the biggest one is in East Antarctica, and it's marked as the Totten Glacier. It's the size of California and Texas combined. It's 2 miles high, and like I think all these glaciers that are close to the shore are seated in seawater of about the bottom 1,500 feet are seated in the seawater that's warming. So if this one glacier, I realize it's a narrow opening, it's not like that was not likely to slip into the sea, but if it were all to melt and slip into the sea, that one glacier alone would jump the sea level about 11 feet. A third danger that is accelerating this problem is black soot. Somebody needs to mute. Somebody is an audience member was okay. A third danger is black soot. And next slide. The reason Greenland's ice is now stained gray or black on top, and this is ordinary air pollution. Now, some of it comes from volcanic explosions on. Well, now that would only be on Iceland, I think. I don't know if they have volcanoes on Greenland, but this is our ordinary air pollution that routinely deposits this filth, getting darker and darker as the ice melts down, and once buried filth from 50 years ago or 100 years ago from burning coal comes to the surface, accumulates, and the warming accelerates and absorbs more sunlight. And if we melt all of Greenland completely, 20 feet of sea level rise. Well, are you thoroughly depressed yet?
Yeah.
Good.
Getting there.
Good. That's what I'm trying to do. Get you all stirred up. Let me have a drink of water like Senator Rubio. Hold on a minute. All right. Well, I got some good news.
Good.
2 parts. First, my generation will be dead before this happens. Now, it doesn't seem fair that we, the very people causing this mess, will not be here to suffer the chaos we're imposing on our grandchildren, but at least we'll be gone, and that'll be a relief. Now, back to Yogi Berra, and speaking of the future, Yogi Berra also said, I'm sorry, I try not to laugh. If you don't know where you're going, you'll end up somewhere else. Well, he also said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Maybe I like that one better. But the second part of the good news is that many smart young people do know where they're going, and this nice boy's going on a climate march. And Greta Thunberg from Sweden, I'm sure you've heard of her, the teenager who scolded and jolted world leaders with straight talk that most adults are incapable of. This is just a street parade thing that I would love to see. If anybody knows what this is, I want to see it. I think it's fabulous. Well, Greta Thunberg, standing at the podium of the UN General Assembly, this teenager said, "We are at the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? How dare you?" And some of us probably have green teenagers or children or grandchildren asking us, what have we done to the planet they will inherit? Now, the awareness and activism of young people is very good news. Uh, but now, this girl that's not Greta Thunberg in the middle, the blonde girl, looks a little bit like her, but she's one of just another picture of nice young people marching. Well, now back to your third takeaway, and I have more bad news. So this is a kind of a yin and yang thing, I make you cry and I try to make you laugh. I mean, we got to have some emotion here. Today, my generation's ignorance and greed with business as usual continues, made even worse by hydraulic fracturing called fracking, to extract methane, also known as natural gas, to replace coal. Next slide. Now, for fracking may cause your home's water faucet to be ignitable, or put out carcinogenic chemicals out of your shower head into your face and lungs, or explode your home. But these local horrors are not the most important part of it. The worst is that natural gas is falsely advertised as clean energy, and you might want to talk to Florida Power and Light about that, when in fact natural gas is probably the most climate-killing fossil fuel of all. The reason is that so much methane leaks from earthquake fissures at the wells, in the thousands of miles of pipelines, in the cracked and very old pipes in our old cities, like Boston and Baltimore, leaking under the streets and into homes. And I've already mentioned that one molecule of so-called fugitive or leaked and unburned methane has an immediate impact that's about 100 times more climate killing than one molecule of CO2 that results from burning the methane as fuel. Now, if 3 to 8% of raw natural gas always leaks, and that is an official US government estimate from NOAA and EPA from some years ago. So you do the math, multiply 100 by 3 to 8%, and you can see that the extraction and distribution of natural gas is killing the climate somewhere between 3 and 8 times faster than burning coal to make the equivalent amount of energy. All right, now back to the happy side. Your fourth takeaway is very good news. We have all the technologies and the experience to stop climate change destruction starting now. More than 50 years ago, before my generation went back to sleep, in 1962, Rachel Carson published Silent Spring. Look, it was only 75 cents for a new book. And in the 1960s, young people were then marching in the streets for many reasons, including not just opposing the war in Vietnam or for civil rights or women's rights, but also opposing out of control pollution. And so in 1970, our nation created the US Environmental Protection Agency. Now, if you wonder whether our EPA, of which I'm a proud alumnus, can protect the climate, let's look back and remember a few things we have accomplished. Now, EPA saved the American eagle, the very symbol of America. And on the left and right, you see a peregrine falcon and an osprey, these raptors. Were being killed. We're on the verge of extinction, but Rachel Carson named DDT and a number of other pesticides, and EPA in 1972 banned it. And by the 80s, the eagles were coming back, and we began decades of cleaning up much of our water pollution. In the 1980s, just look at the first part of this where it says history, this slide. EPA, using cap and trade, took the lead out of gasoline that was causing brain damage in babies in our urban cities. In the 1990s, again using cap and trade, EPA stopped acid rain from power plants that was killing northern forests and across the northeast US and into northeastern Canada, also in Germany. I called it Waldsterben, forest death in Germany. In 1980, EPA began a continuing effort that stopped industrial toxic waste dumping across America by too many of our biggest and supposedly finest companies, many with household names, big corporations behaving disgustingly. My anger over that was what brought me into this field. toxic waste dumping. Now, most relevant, the most relevant thing that EPA is taking care of, most relevant to climate change, are a family of man-made hydrocarbons, gases, mostly propellants and refrigerants, not existing in nature, synthetic man-made chemicals. And because these air pollutants allow excess radiation to hit the surface of the earth, we're still suffering too much skin cancer and too many cataracts of the eyes. A lot of these come from air conditioners. By the way, now it's a crime now if your air conditioner technician vents the chemicals in your air conditioners to the atmosphere. That's a federal crime right now, so you should report them. And it should be a crime around the world. And this is because luckily, in 1987, Ronald Reagan and the Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher, you remember her from the UK? They were two conservatives who actually listened to scientists. Imagine that. They signed a treaty called the Montreal Protocol. And now in 2021, we're in the fourth decade of our EPA and 197 others, almost all the nations of the world that are functioning nations, are all signatories cooperating globally to control these escaping gases. Now, this treaty is a twofer. First, it stabilizes the natural stratospheric ozone shield that blocks too much solar radiation from reaching the surface of the Earth and frying us. And secondly, because these same ozone-killing chemicals are also powerful climate-killing chemicals, the same treaty helps slow climate change. The Montreal Protocol is the model for an effective climate treaty needed to upgrade the Paris Accord that is much too weak to save us. Now, the point is that as soon as possible, we must eliminate extracting and burning coal, oil, and probably the worst fossil fuel of all, natural gas. To replace them, we must, well, you see these wind turbines along the berm of the dike in Holland. It's just amazing what other countries have done. And of course, if that berm is overtopped, these will make the power to pump out the fields, the polders. We must accelerate the uptake of renewables like wind and also nuclear power, and I'll come back to that. First, I want to highlight hydrogen that for about 10 years has been powering Mercedes buses. Look at this, running in London. And the first production hydrogen car came to us from Japan in 2016. Well, I don't think it's come here. It may be in California, I'm not sure. It's called the Mirai, M-I-R-A-I, meaning the future in Japanese. It's also from Toyota that since 1997 has been making the Prius. Now, how sad that most of these technologies are foreign. Americans sometimes buy and install them, but these products are not yet much made in America by American workers and investors. Addicted to the grip of fossil fuels, America's been losing technology and jobs. And we need to boost nuclear power. I don't know if any of you saw Fareed Zakaria on TV today on CNN. He's my favorite Sunday talk show guy. He said pretty much the same things I'm going to tell you now. That it's perhaps surprising and yet a most important part of your fourth takeaway that we need nuclear power. Now, perhaps you remember the Jane Fonda's movie, The China Syndrome. It came out just before the failure at 3 Mile Island of the nuclear power plant near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Now, that movie frightened us so hysterically. But the truth is that radiation from this power plant killed nobody. I don't think it injured anybody. And also, a plant like that cannot explode like a bomb. Now, Fukushima was a tidal wave disaster, not a nuclear disaster. Now, yes, because of Russian bungling and cover-up, Chernobyl killed people. But each year, ordinary air pollution from coal burning kills, to this day, about 1 million people around the world for every one person ever killed by a nuclear power plant. There's no question that coal is the most deadly and nuclear power is the safest way to make electricity. Nuclear power is the only source that has enormous capacity, is climate friendly and constant, so it can power the grid when the sun does not shine and the wind does not blow. Now, while this building on the front in red, it's hard to read, but it says China Experimental Fast Reactor. Maybe you can't see it. Now, while the primitive light water second generation reactors commercialized starting 50 years ago someday must be retired, we have to stop freaking out about nuclear power. Now China has built this first experimental fast reactor. These are called, you can Google them, called integral fast reactors. They're also called thorium reactors or molten salt reactors. And these modern so-called fourth generation reactors cannot melt down. They cannot be used to proliferate plutonium and make nuclear weapons. And they will use as free fuel and eliminate the barely used nuclear waste stored in pools around so many of today's primitive reactors. Of course, the foolish US government keeps trying to bury this stuff in Yucca Mountain, but it's fuel for advanced reactors. Well, very smart people like Bill Gates are investing, and South Korea, Russia, and other nations are beginning to build them. I think what's particularly fascinating is that China, I think, will soon begin making SMRs. Now, and I'm not talking about Girl Scout cookies, s'mores. I'm talking about small modular reactors, SMRs, the size of big refrigerators. And build them in shipyards, mass produce them, ship them out everywhere in the world to plug them in. How many do you want? 4, 10, 20, line them up, plug them in. And the world is waiting for this. And meanwhile, whether from hysteria or sleepiness in the grip of fossil fuels, for decades, America has been falling behind as usual. Another Marco Rubio moment here. Thank you. I'm almost through. Now, 3 minutes ago, I mentioned cap and trade, and perhaps many people ask me, well, what's cap and trade? And how does it work? So let's look at cap and trade as the first of the two most important economic tools that we have to protect our climate. Now, it has been said that if the only tool you have is a hammer, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem is a nail to be pounded. And indeed, EPA's traditional method is what we call command and control, using do it now or else type regulations. But some environmental problems can be fixed with market mechanisms like cap and trade. And so it was. I think that a conservative, yes, it was a conservative free market think tank. I think it was the Heritage Foundation during the 70s conceptualized this new approach. Now, I want to explain the mechanics of what could be a national cap and trade decarbonization program to protect the climate. Scientists would first determine as a starting point the total carbon that can be emitted by all polluting sources. This is called the cap, or upper level. Then EPA issues permits, often called pollution or allowances. In Europe, they call them allowances or credits. We call them permits. And the law will require each source to have enough permits for its allowed carbon pollution. Over time, EPA would gradually reduce the cap, or total pollution allowed, and not reissue the corresponding number of permits. Now, in the free marketplace, as demand and supply, the fewer permits may become more expensive as EPA reduces the cap. The big innovation is to make these permits tradable, like commodities on a public exchange or face-to-face between companies. So picture this. Can you see my hands? Imagine two factories, the clean one here and a dirty one in my right hand. The clean one, early in the cap and trade program, already had depreciated, dirty equipment needing replacement anyway. It was obsolete. It was expired. So it scrapped it and switched to clean, climate-friendly fuels and technology. And now this source does not need its permits. It doesn't have to buy any permits, and it has them for sale. And it will be rewarded by being able to sell its unneeded permits to the free market. To recover some of the capital cost to modernize is a nice reward for being among the first to come clean. That's why companies like this. So the climate killing factory will pay good money to buy the permits from the clean factory and continue to operate its equipment until its equipment is fully depreciated, or until it becomes too expensive to buy carbon polluting carbon pollution permits because they become more scarce because EPA shrinks the cap. And over time, as everywhere, dirty old equipment has to, like your air conditioner, has to be replaced anyway. Each year passes and more factories will switch, spending money to modernize instead of buying more permits. And when the cap falls to zero and all climate killing must stop from these sources, all sources using dirty fuels and equipment must immediately switch to climate-friendly operation. That's cap and trade. The industry likes it because a cap and trade program allows its existing equipment to wear out before until it would need to be replaced anyway, and rewards those who modernize first. Now, unfortunately, over the last 4 decades, industry's climate change denial and obstruction have squandered the time for this. And now EPA may have to very quickly reduce the cap or force early retrofitting and early replacement before the old equipment is fully depreciated. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. And yeah, there we go. That's it. I can't see what's at the top, but that's okay. This slide is shows the picture of Arthur Pigou. He's an Edwardian economist from 100 years ago. And now that climate change is an emergency, his attention is turning to him because he developed another market-based policy instrument more than 100 years ago called taxes on polluting taxes. Pigovian taxes are also called sin taxes. Excuse me again. Sin, S-I-N. Taxes on troublesome products. Now, sin taxes send price signals to the buyers either to select another product that is cheaper, being tax-free and cleaner, that is without sin, or alternatively, when buying a troublesome product, to pay the sin tax to cover the cost of the damage the product will externalize or offload or cast off on the society or the environment. In the EU, they call this the polluter pays principle, the polluter pays principle. Now, if using taxes to send price signals in the marketplace sounds radical, like European socialism, well, consider that most American states, including red states, routinely use sin taxes. Now, what am I talking about? Well, they all tax cigarettes. They tax liquor. They use state lotteries as tax raising devices. And more recently, we're adding marijuana to this list. And this is nothing new. It's familiar, and most modern economists favor using higher product pricing to internalize. I'm using some economic jargon here, but you need to hear it because you might hear it again. The full environmental and social costs of troublesome and addictive products in the product price. The modern so-called true cost accounting principles also look macroeconomically beyond gross domestic product or GDP, and they look microeconomically beyond the internal finances of a company. So true cost accounting looks outside at the society and also to calculate a nation's, and also inside a company to calculate its so-called externalized costs offloaded and impacts inflicted or destroying natural and social capital needed to sustain overall economic progress. Nothing new here. Now, I'm a little bit lost where I am. Let me see. Okay, now this trusty old syntax tool may be being applied right in your city or neighborhood where retail stores are imposing a tax or fee at checkout. If you still take those throwaway, blowaway, flimsy plastic market bags that end up blowing up in the trees and down the street, smart shoppers are happy to switch to the reusable cloth market bags, now available everywhere and often given away to the public. Smart retailers put their names on reusable bags and maybe even give them to steady customers. Only shoppers who still want the plastic blowaway bags would have to pay the nuisance tax or fee to get them at the register. Each shopper has a free market choice freely made. And now let's turn from blowaway bags to runaway climate. To protect the climate, today many conservative investors, now look at the names here, James Baker, Henry Paulson, second Bush's Treasury Secretary, George Shultz, Rob Walton of the Walmart era. These are Martin Feldstein, a former head of the Bush Council of Economic Advisors, and many Nobel Prize winners. I think all the uh, members who were presidents of the Council of Economic Advisors all favor this, and the reasons are in the 4 lines up top. So conservative business leaders favoring a free market-based policy called carbon fee and dividend. The money will come from a carbon tax on the makers and sources of climate-killing fossil fuels to which we seem addicted and trapped into buying. A dividend means that all the money collected will be rebated equally to all the people of America. This tax can be and is called a fee because it's revenue neutral, meaning it's paid directly back out to the people and not kept by the government to hire more bureaucrats or prosecutors like me. Another small government's another reason that conservatives like this. Now, sometimes to sell a new program or policy, we need a good slogan. I think for COVID, if we adopted the slogan, mask it or casket, we'd be a lot further down the road with fighting COVID. For carbon fee and dividend, a good slogan is to tax the bads to free the goods. Now, what are the bads? I've already mentioned them: alcohol, cigarettes, blow away plastic bags, and other troublesome and sometimes addictive products. On the flip side of this policy, too, for what are the goods? Well, the goods, of course, are climate-friendly fuels. They don't pay the sin tax. So advanced nuclear power and renewable fuels, not using combustion to make CO2. The goods are also the consumer products that use the clean energy, like EVs, hydrogen-powered trucks and buses, rooftop solar panels, whatever. When consumers and businesses receive their cash rebates of the carbon fees, most will choose not to buy more dirty, high-cost fossil fuels, but will switch to technologies using clean fuels that cost less. Millions of new jobs will be created. The changeover can be very quick if you mobilize the free market magic, where profits are huge. Just remember how quickly flat screen TVs wiped out the big, remember those big old fat, heavy cathode ray tube TVs, and how quickly laptop computers and iPhones swept away the old products. I even had to get rid of my flip phone. So where are we?
Right.
All right. Well, to show how this has already been done in more civilized and advanced nations than ours, there's another book recommendation, A Bright Future, How Some Countries Have Solved Climate Change, and the rest can follow. You can tell by the name of the second author, Staffan, you can't really see it, but Staffan Kvist, Q-V-I-S-T. You may surmise that Sweden is the country that's done this the best. And the USA can do it too. To EPA professionals, climate change, just one more same old air pollution problem to be addressed and solved, just like we already have done with so many. I'm only talking to you now because I do think, like Rosie the Riveter in World War II, that as a nation, we can wake up to extreme danger and get to work. So there you have your takeaways from my book. It's a perfect book for you to give and buy and give to a green young person in your family who agrees that we can do it. Keep the rest of the climate-killing fuel buried in the ground with the rest of the fossils. And because of these young people protesting, and because we just elected a new president who feels young like I do, I personally, at age 80, am quite chirpy and optimistic, and with a very scratchy throat. So hold on. I hope all of you are hopeful too. Well, here you can read on the screen a very summary form, your 4 takeaways. We must price carbon to include its full social costs and environmental costs. We must pursue climate protection globally with the same rigor and continuous improvement as in the Montreal Protocol, as it has shown the world can achieve, dealing with chlorofluorocarbons and their successors. As the sea moves in to drown our coastal cities, our property losses will be huge, but I'm hopeful our grandchildren will have just enough time to save their grandchildren, who will be our great-great-grandchildren, from facing extinction in the 22nd or 23rd century. The good news is we can realistically hope for humanity to survive our efforts to kill the climate. Now, one more quote from Yogi Berra. And this may be his most famous. He also said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. Remember that one? All right. Well, good advice, because to protect our EPA from political manipulation by science deniers, we must turn back to 2016 and take the fork in the road that prevents total climate chaos. I have a number of poems in my book. I confess I like poetry, and I sometimes write really bad poetry. But don't worry, this little poem, it's only 8 lines and a verse. I want to read it. The title is the first line. It was written in 1945 and then adopted by abolitionists opposing slavery. And it's also the verse of a Protestant hymn. You might even sing it if you went to a Protestant church today. So let me just read it because I can't resist. Once to every man and nation comes the moment to decide in the strife of truth and falsehood for the good or evil side, some great cause, some great decision, offering each the bloom or blight, and the choice goes by forever twixt that darkness and that light.
Mm.
Isn't that a great poem?
Mm.
Yeah. Well, this ends my presentation. I thank Tracy Wasserman for showing the PowerPoint so expertly. And I turn the microphone back over to Faith for whatever comes next. Thank you for this opportunity to meet all of you.
Wow, thank you so much. That was an incredible education to be continued, and very apropos with the timing of Earth Day, which just passed. I'm sure that people have some questions, and so I would love to open up the mics if anybody would like to have any feedback.
I have one.
Any questions to Richard?
I have an observation. Richard, I read a book by Stephen Hawking, the famous scientist who is, before he died, was trying to build a spaceship that could take you to light years into outer space, because he said this planet won't be inhabitable much longer. But I think he gave the timeline as 400 years back in 1960. So I just wanted to make that observation because that's a little bit more hopeful than what you said.
Well, but as time goes by, every prediction becomes more dire, and even the international organization is called the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, which is about 3,000 scientists around the world. They're very conservative in total because they kind of come to at least a common denominator statement of what the situation is. But every time and they issue quadrennial reports, every time they issue a report, it's worse. You know, I mean, it never gets better. At least it hasn't yet, what the predictions are. And I was shocked that the Atlantic magazine told me, no, you're wrong when you say extinction is coming in the 23rd century. We're changing a letter to the editor this month of May to say it's the 22nd century. I said, well, I don't know. Okay, that makes it even more frightening, but so be it.
Donna Estes has her hand up.
Yes, I wanted to ask, I saw what you said about nuclear energy, you know, that Bill Gates thinks it's good. Isn't there waste and all that? You know, that I think that's so dangerous. And the other thing that I wonder, can there possibly be in a country like ours climate, I don't know what to call it, laws or policies that can be put in place permanently beyond party? I mean, would something like that be possible given the fractured nature of our populace in their beliefs? But I think we need a kind of a transcending universal policies on this stuff because this is so serious.
Well,
Well said.
well, obviously I agree with you, and it's up to all of us to make that happen. And the reason I'm happy to talk with all of you is to try to encourage you to, as John Kennedy said, go forth with renewed vigor and do something, you know? And I can't say to the politics, it's up to us. Our fate is in our hands.
Well, we need grassroots organization. I'm from the 60s in Berkeley, and people did band together. There was, grassroots, and we've got to do that.
Well, join a climate march. Your grandkids I'm not sure a young girl like you has grandkids, but you can go and see if they'll take you along. But now, as far as the nuclear waste is concerned, the total amount of nuclear waste in America that's been produced by all the power plants that are already here, commercialized starting 50 years ago, only occupies the size of a football field and stacked up about 10 feet high. Now that's not a lot of waste, and all that waste will be consumed by fourth generation nuclear reactors. It's kind of dangerous because it hasn't been barely used by the second generation nuclear power plants, but the advanced ones will consume it almost down to nothing as fuel. So solve that problem. And yeah, there's always going to be nuclear waste, but it's not like destroying the air. You can bury it somewhere or deep inject it. I mean, look, they're talking about deep injecting CO2. If you can deep inject CO2, I mean, think of the volumes of that as compared to the minuscule amounts of nuclear waste that you could deep inject. So no, there really aren't any problems that aren't solvable from nuclear power that I see. And Bill Gates, he's writing a book about this too. He sort of recently came to this same conclusion that I'm coming to and trying to persuade you all about. We need to move forward with nuclear fourth generation nuclear power.
Richard, with regard to Bill Gates's book, I recently read it and was very favorably impressed on the one hand by his sort of quantitative approach to understanding what the different sources of the problem were, et cetera. And I read it before I read the New York Times review, which was the most brutal negative review of any book I have ever seen in the New York Times. Do you have any comment? He said he was like Gates was on another planet, and he doesn't know he's 10 years behind the times. Those were some of his more positive comments. I mean, but do you have any comments on that?
Well, I haven't read the review. I heard about it. I think they didn't like that he talked a lot about himself. A lot was in the first person, like his voyage of discovery and maybe too much.
Yeah, but it was more than that. The guy said basically he's 10 years behind the times. And I couldn't imagine Gates not talking to a lot of his friends in the industry who would be up to date. But it was a vicious, brutal review that said he was way off base and had nothing positive to say about it. And I was surprised. I'd never read a review like that.
It may be that he's promoting a third generation instead of a fourth generation plant. He wants to build his own model nuclear reactor, and he's put in plans for it. And it may be that he's not used the latest design, but I don't know. But that's a good question. I just can't answer.
I have a question.
Okay, Joni.
Yeah, sorry. So you're pro the nuclear, clean nuclear energy. How does the plant that was it Japan that had the a clean nuclear energy reactor? I don't know. It sounds as though it's not going to produce the same amount of what you do with the spent rods, or is it a totally different nuclear energy process?
I don't know. I just had an email this morning from the League of Women Voters. Some of you all in Boca are probably members, uh, asking if my friend Terry Sullivan, who's a nuclear physicist from Brookhaven National Labs, could talk to the League of Women Voters. Find out and sign up for that talk and ask him that question.
Yeah.
I don't know about every nuclear power plant. I would say this about Fukushima. You know, they had about a 20-foot seawall, but a 40-foot tidal wave. Okay, so that was bad planning. And here's the human death toll from Fukushima, as I understand it. 18,000 killed by the natural disaster, which is the tidal wave. Perhaps 1,000 died, killed in the frantic and botched evacuation. When Japan shut down, at least temporarily, its nuclear power plants and switched to all coal burning, at least for a while. Well, that's probably killed 10,000 people or 20,000 people just in Japan from burning coal when they shut their nuclear power plants. And I don't think anybody was killed by nuclear energy at Fukushima. I don't know, but that was the facts I came up with when I wrote the book. Maybe there's been some deaths since then, but the conclusion is that radiation rarely kills anyone, but fear of radiation kills a lot of people.
What about hydrogen?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of hydrogen, and it has some wonderful applications. One little battle I'm fighting right now back to Maine is that they're building new ferries, but they're going to power them with diesel. Maybe they're going to be diesel electric. And Norway and San Francisco and other places in Europe, they're building hydrogen. Hydrogen's perfect for ferries, you know, and heavy equipment. I think they're even flying hydrogen-powered airplanes on an experimental basis now. So yeah, hydrogen is a huge thing. It's kind of in a race with electric as to, you know, where to use it, where does it go, and so far electric seems to be winning, but hydrogen is oh yeah, and think about making the hydrogen with wind power, or say you have really windy days and it's also a sunny day and you have excess wind power. You split the CO2, excuse me, the H2O, the water, to take out the hydrogen. You can transport it in tanks, which you can't do with electricity. You can store it, you can keep it. You put it in buses and whatnot, and when it's consumed on the road, it puts out a trickle of water as it recombines to make water. That's 100% combustion-free fuel from production to consumption on the road. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And of course, nuclear power plants can make it too, can do the hydrolytic, hydrolysis, I think they call it, to separate water into hydrogen and oxygen. Sell the oxygen too, sell it to hospitals, I don't know, whoever was.
I've heard recently
It's a
that there's-
no-brainer.
Right. Well, and I've heard recently there's a company that is actually transferring sunlight into hydrogen, and then it creates water. Now, if you have small plants or large plants of hydrogen plants, that's going to produce the runoff of water, which we're using up really quickly also. So I don't know. My vote is for hydrogen.
I think hydrogen deserves a lot more attention too. I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, it's getting it in Europe, but of course they're more advanced than we are.
Yeah, much.
Mhm.
Thank
I
you,
agree.
Tony. Yes, so we have another question. Rufus, please.
Excellent talk, Richard. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm wondering, maybe this is a little bit out of your purview, but you probably know a lot about Miami. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the city of Miami and what they're facing in terms of climate change and how they're handling it. They seem to be throwing a lot of money at it from what I read from a distance.
Well, that's ground zero for sea level rise. And I really don't know much more than what I read in the paper that, you know, they're getting king tides now and regular street flooding. They're trying to raise streets but you know, the truth about Miami right now is they're still building these huge buildings, but you know, the investors are out of there in 5 years, and the insurance company can catch you on a yearly basis until banks stop issuing 30-year mortgages for these places. They're still going to sell. So, but truthfully, I don't think it really matters in the long term because I think Miami's doomed. It's from what I see from the science. But party on, party on.
Richard, any general comments on Biden's climate change plans that he just revealed?
Yeah, I'm really upset he doesn't have carbon fee and dividend in there as part of it, because that is something you could pass by reconciliation, since it's a budget and tax measure that could be part of a you know, a 51 vote passage, and it does have a lot of conservative support, and it should be part of his plan, and I'm very disappointed it's not.
Saul has a question.
Well, first of all, just for the record, I've got the energy news quarterly from FPL, and they're saying 72% of the mix is natural gas. Okay. I also think that in terms of nuclear, France was an outlier. France was one of the few nations that really dominated the nuclear energy, I think. And at the time, everybody was against it, I guess, because of 3 Mile Island or whatever else occurred afterwards.
Yeah. Well, those French plants are not the most modern ones because they were built early on, like the ones we have in America, second generation. And hopefully they'll be upgrading to the more modern plants that I described as so-called fourth generation or integral fast reactors. But yeah, certainly France has a different take on it. And the UK is going very green faster than we are. And of course, there's Sweden. So we have a lot to learn from visiting other countries that are progressive.
Right.
Any questions? I have a quick question. Well, I have a few, but so you mentioned a movie earlier, and I was remembering how freaked out I was when I saw a movie called Silkwood with Meryl Streep. And yeah, I mean, that instilled a great fear in me about nuclear power. And I mean, granted, that was back, in the, I guess, the 80s, that film, but what do you say to people, you know, I mean, that for me, that was like the Jaws movie that kept people out of the ocean, you know, that movie really scared me about nuclear power.
Well,
And I'd like to
wasn't she the woman who was,
about it.
wasn't she killed while she was trying to blow the whistle? Wasn't she killed? Isn't that the story about Silkwood?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, that's what did happen.
Yeah, there was some woman who was rushing to tell the truth, and I think they killed her on the roadside or something. And of course, you can suspect who it was. But I honestly don't remember that it implicated, how it implicated whatever utility was suspected of hiring the hitman. You know, I don't know. I just don't remember it well enough.
Employees were getting cancer, and that's what they were investigating and blowing the whistle on.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, what else is new in America with the way we treat pesticides and, you know, lead? And I mean, oh my God, I mean, this country's, we're lucky most of us are still here at our ages. And people suffer terribly, particularly in poor neighborhoods that are located next to these, some of these horrors.
Anybody have any questions? We still have a few minutes, and before we show our little bookstore video, I want to give you an opportunity. I'm going to put Richard's information in the chat right now.
Faith, I was thinking I would just send the video with the recording of this talk to everybody. would be easier that way.
Okay, I'm already doing it, but okay.
Well, if you want to, my video volume isn't working properly, but if you can, if not, I can just share it. I'll be sending the recording of this presentation to everybody who signed up, including the people who didn't attend, who had signed up but didn't get a chance to attend. So I'll look for an email from the Friends of the Boca Raton Public Library on that.
Can't spell pollution.
I'm wondering if there are any activist groups, particularly for climate change in Florida. I would love to know about that.
Okay, I'll tell you the one I like and I'm a member of is called CCL, Citizens Climate Lobby, and they're pretty much 100% focused on carbon fee and dividend, and so am I, which is why I like them so much. But CCL, Citizens Climate Lobby, I'm sure you can Google them and join the Florida chapter. There's also another group for, I'm 80 years old. I can't believe I made it this far, but it's called Elders for Climate Action, ECA. And it's about grandparents who have finally decided to get responsible, you know, and that's another one that has Florida chapters and they're lovely people. And there are many more, you know, there are probably 10 of them or more that you could join.
What was the first one, please?
Citizens Climate Lobby, CCL. They have a Broward County chapter and a Palm Beach County chapter.
Can you put those names in chat, please?
I can try. Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll do it.
Well, if nobody else has any questions for Richard at this time, I just want to, again, thank you so much for your amazing presentation today. And wow, those of us that were here are really lucky to have been here with you. And
Thank you.
I hope that people will look in the chat and remember to go on, buy your book, www.fightingpollution.com. And
Fightingpollutionbook.com.
yes, I have it written, but I read it wrong. Fightingpollutionbook.com. And fighting pollution and climate change. And if you want to chat with Richard, you can find him on Facebook as well. I also want to mention to everybody, I want to thank all of our supporters so much for being there for us and helping us survive this past year that's been so difficult. And with our bookstore closed, which is a major source of funding for our programs, it's been really, really hard. And we do appreciate your support and your participation showing up for our programs. If you're able to go on our website, bocalibraryfriends.org. And if you haven't already supported us, please make a donation. Any amount is greatly appreciated, bocalibraryfriends.org. And it's also helpful to us if you would go to a website called greatnonprofits.com. Is it com or org, Tracy? Greatnonprofits.
Greatnonprofits.org. Yeah.
.org, and give us a review and let them know about the important programs that you've enjoyed, that we've brought to you over this past year, even through the pandemic. And I want to give a shout out to Tracy and to everybody on the board. We just received an award, and I'll let Tracy mention what it is. We're very proud of it.
Yes, we just received the Florida Library Association Special Projects Award for 2021 for the special project of converting our physical bookstore into an online bookstore that's been so successful. So we're pretty proud of that. Although technically it hasn't been announced yet, so we're not allowed to put it out in our, it's supposed to be kept confidential, so we just kind of keep it secret there, Faith. That, the Florida Library Association, no, it's the Florida Library Association wants to be announced. We just don't want, we can't publicize it until next week after the Florida Library Association has publicized it, but you're the first to know, aside from the board.
And we have a beautiful new mobile van to go out to underserved communities, and that's going to be just amazing. We're very proud of that, and that's all from support, from donations. And so we want to thank you. And we want to also thank our volunteers that have been hanging in there with us. We're going to be opening and having work for people to do soon. So if you're interested in volunteering, let us know. And be sure to join us. Next month will be our last program for our speaker series for this season on Sunday, May 23rd. And we'll be having the famous contemporary representational painter, Don Perlis from New York. And he's done a wide variety of paintings. If you want to Google him or look up his website, donperlis.com, you can see his work. But I want to emphasize that what we're going to talk about is his narrative paintings. Well, many of them are narrative paintings, but he's done a great deal of paintings on current events that you see in the news, on the news every night. Started with back in the 1980s when he painted an entire larger than life series of subway paintings that was inspired by the subway vigilante. Those of you remember Bernard Goetz shooting of four black teenagers on the subway. And he's been among his genres, been doing many works like that over the years. And his most recent one has been actually the painting was I Can't Breathe, and it was the George Floyd killing. And it was adopted as a billboard campaign across the country. It started in Times Square. It was a big billboard in Times Square, and then it went all across the country. And it's been on the news. I've seen it on the news on a lot of different stations from different states. And so I want to invite you all to join us for that May 23rd. And thank you again, Richard Emery, for your wonderful presentation today. It's been an honor having you. Thank you for all your great work and service. And
Hey, it was fun.
Following up with you down the road.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you, everybody, for being here. We really appreciate it. We love to see you. We can't wait to see you in person again soon. Thank you and take care. Till next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.